welcome back to another Deep podcast. I'm D,
And I'm Cast.
and today we're going to be talking about gambling. And since the status quo for gambling is that it is regulated and in many ways illegal or heavily restricted, I think the question that we're going to try to answer is, should gambling be restricted, and why should it be restricted? So, Initial thoughts.
So I think that the question of whether or not it should be restricted really comes down to the morality of it. Is it morally right to be gambling? And is it morally right to gamble on certain things versus other things? Like, should you be able to have a tontine? Is it, I think, a different question than should you be able to bet on who wins the Super Bowl? So these are, I think we need to break down,
So let's start off simple. Why would betting on the Super Bowl or betting on a sports game be immoral? Because you're starting off by saying it's immoral. What makes it immoral to bet on the results of a sports game?
I'm not saying it is immoral. I'm saying that there is a difference in morality between a sports game and a tontine.
What's a tontine?
So a tontine is where a group of people basically put in a large pool of money, and the last person to die gets all of the money. And so you are gambling on the fact that you will be the last one. Everyone else will die before you, which often means that you end up killing them.
Right. So I think the immorality of a tontine then would be, it puts you in a position where you are encouraged, at least by money, to kill the other people in the group.
Yeah, or, help them towards their death.
Right, and encourage them to do risky behavior that ends in them likely dying.
Yeah.
So that's the fact that it's an unstable situation that encourages people to either force other people into risky situations or just outright kill them. That's what makes it immoral.
I mean, it puts you into you enter into a moral quandary where you are deciding between helping someone because they're your friend, or helping, not helping them or actively hurting them because of the money that's on the line.
You may want to save your friend because you like your friend, but if there's $1 million on the line, you'll be less inclined to help them.
Right.
So
exactly.
when a bet gets in the way of you helping other people, or when it encourages
immoral behavior.
Yeah. So that encouraging immoral behavior is something that betting can lead to. What about in sports games?
So in sports games, unless you are, part of the industry, you probably don't have any way of forcing things one way or another. Some people believe that, praying to their individual gods will help, but I'm going to say that that's not morally problematic.
Sure, it's equivalent to hoping, but hoping with a particular expectation that there is a conscious entity that's helping you out.
Right. Until someone proves that, and proves that there is a conscious entity that helps out. I mean, if someone proves that, then it becomes immoral. But actually, that's a good question. If someone actively believes that their god or some all-powerful being is going to help them help a certain team win a sporting game that is supposed to be all about skill and supposed to be fair to either side, meaning one of the sides is better than the other for one reason or another, is it wrong for someone to pray for their god to
basically if they
win?
believe that God will interfere with the result of the sports game and they're praying for that God to interfere, effectively what they're doing is trying to cheat.
Right.
In which case, praying for a victory is in some regards attempting to cheat, even if there's no statistical there's no statistical correlation between praying and success.
It would be interesting to have like a sports league where the team that you want to win is correlated or connected directly to your religion, and then we can see which god loves who the most.
It would be an interesting experiment to do, of seeing if praying for different gods made you more or less successful. But the difficulty would be in actually measuring how that actually impacted the game, because if you have a lot of players, then there are a lot
Yeah.
of variables making it really difficult. But that's
Right.
part of
That's why you make every team is just a clone of each other. And if you find some
now hold on.
statistical
If we're
anomaly,
talking about cloning, I think that's going to be the bigger moral
yeah.
dilemma that we need to solve.
Well, I mean, I bet we like to say that this podcast will bring up anything can be brought up.
Sure.
Most people probably don't think about cloning when they think about gambling and
Sure.
the morality of gambling. But hey,
So I think in terms of sports games, the problem isn't are you praying for success? It's are you actively manipulating the variables that are known? So
right.
God's interference, well, that's not really a known or quantitatable variable. However, we have in this football game, American football, we have a kicker that's trying to hit a field goal to earn extra points. And someone said, hey, I bet against your team. I'll give you a portion of the bet if I win it. And I'll only give it to you if you help, intentionally throw the game. So intentionally miss points. Same thing. I think a big problem was in boxing of intentionally throwing fights, making it look like you're putting up a fight, but intentionally throwing the fight and having someone else that bet against you so that they can earn money, and then you can also earn money even by losing.
Yep.
So
it's like, it is cheating, or like threatening the person who's in the match to either paying them off or threatening them, like I'm gonna kill your wife if you don't throw this match or whatever, or I'm gonna visit your mom later and
so
do bad things.
Sure. So let's stick with not the threats, because I think that threats, the immoral aspect of threats is the threat itself, not necessarily the integrity of the game. With gambling, if the other person, if the goal is to win, and you intentionally throw the fight, well, the other player or the other team wins, so it's good for them. And if you're a cheater, who cares if you lose? Sure, you may be monetarily benefiting from it, but what is inherently immoral about fixing a fight?
It comes down to I guess the virtues of the game, the idea behind it that the more skilled team wins or the more skilled person wins, and by disrupting that, you are disrupting the entire goal of the sport.
You're disrupting the entire premise of what sports are. Sports are a way for people to compete in non-lethal ways. If you look back to, all right, what are some of the original sports? Things like spear throwing or javelin throwing. Looking to Scottish history, how far can I throw this big log or this big rock?
How far can I throw my wife or carry my wife in some cases too?
Exactly. So it harkens back to in ancient times when people wanted to compete. If they wanted to compete for sexual prowess, or say who should get the mates, you try to demonstrate that you are the best, and you demonstrate that by killing off your competition.
Yeah,
we eventually discovered you don't have to kill off your competition. You can just demonstrate that you're more skilled than them, so that if you were in a fight, you would probably win, and that makes you the dominant person. So sports are a continuation of that, where you're trying to demonstrate your superiority in a particular area. And if you intentionally, if you do anything but your best, then you're sacrificing not the morality, but you're saying I don't value the concept of sports.
Right.
And more specifically, you're valuing the money that you could make off of it more than the sport itself.
Right. That's why, there are a lot of things there. I mean, it should be a game of skill and nothing else. It's like, who can do this thing the fastest or the best? And I mean, in some cases it's like, but best in this case, came down to luck. The wind may have fluctuated in a certain way, and so there's always variables there. It's like, the best team doesn't always win, but statistically they will. Like,
sure. And it's everyone is faced. The goal of a sport is to make everyone faced with approximately even luck. So if you're playing in the wind, everyone is playing in the wind. As an example, if there's one-sided, so I believe in tennis matches you switch back and forth between who's playing on what side, so that if the sun is in someone's eyes it's in each person's eyes half the time.
Right. Yeah, they do that in a lot of sports. You'll switch sides of the field
Mm-hmm.
halfway through, or if it's quarterly,
Right,
maybe
but
quarterly. But
basically, you're trying to even out the playing field, quite literally,
yeah,
as much as possible to make sure that the only thing, or at least the primary variables that are determining who wins, are
hmm
this is the skill of the players.
yeah. And so when you remove the skill of the players from the equation, you are kind of morally bankrupting the sport itself, the point
When
of the sport.
when you have something that motivates players to go against the whole premise of sports, which is to do your best. When you
hmm
have a component, in this case gambling, that encourages players to potentially not do their best, you're corrupting the sport itself. So I
Right.
think that that's the component that would make gambling a corruption of a sport, is not the fact that it interferes with the result. It's the fact
Yep.
that we as a species value the idea of trying your best to determine who is the best through a sport, which is, while many of them involve violence, like football and wrestling and martial arts, you're not there to hurt the other people. You're
hmm
there to prove that you are better at a particular skill.
Right.
So,
Um,
go
so
ahead.
yeah, I think that gets to the point of, if gambling is encouraging uh, interfering with the
It interferes with the integrity of the game,
right,
and
exactly,
and,
yeah,
and I think that, and
it could interfere, if it does interfere, like,
yeah,
I
yes,
think in a lot of cases there's very strict systems set up to try to prevent interference and
and the
prevent people
reason
that
that
are
I think the reason
involved
that
in the thing.
the
Yeah,
reason that those institutions are set up is to uphold the integrity of the game.
right.
And if you have a sport that does not have integrity and people are not trying as hard as they can, then they're encouraged to try to lose,
Mhm.
that is not a game worth playing. So bringing gambling into games on a large scale encourages players to make it so that the sport is no longer worth playing,
Right,
because
and
there's
that's,
no
I
point to
mean,
it. The whole point of a sport is to determine
yeah,
who's the best.
and that's why I think, like, people, I, that's where the idea of regulation comes in. Is it does become more less morally deficient if there's regulation there to prevent people that have any way of affecting the actual end state from betting.
How do you determine who has
I mean,
ability to
the
interfere? If I
yeah,
happen to know someone who is one of the players,
mhm,
and I have a bunch of money, and I make a massive bet against the team, and I say I'll give you 50% of my winnings if the team loses.
right,
That encourages that one player to throw the game. So
mhm,
you would have to manage not only all of the players, but all of the people that each of the players interacts with in any
right,
way.
and it's not. It can be that they can't know everyone and everything, and maybe you don't even know the person, but you find a way to contact them and do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So in some cases, they're going to look for players. Uh, like they can, I know in certain sports, they monitor players' bank accounts and actually, like if they have a sudden huge deposit, they're like, "Hey, where'd this come from? What's
Mm-hmm.
what's going on with this?
Yep.
This came right after you threw a big fight."
And it could even be one of the other problems is people could say, "Oh, I've thrown several games, but occasionally I will do really well, and then just occasionally not do well."
Mhm.
And the person that has been betting against that team can end up just saving that money. So after the person leaves the sport and they're no longer in it, then they can start benefiting from the money that was
Yeah,
set aside.
yeah. I'm not saying that there is a perfect regulation for it. I'm just saying
Sure.
that having some systems in place, at least to um, try to detect issues, and then
I,
try to detect issues and have some sort of punishment thereupon for
I think
doing
the
so.
question is, should there be some sort of detection or should there be an outright ban on it? Because you can there will be a lot, if you don't regulate betting, there will be a lot
Mm-hmm.
of valid betting, but all of that valid betting becomes invalid if someone has a corrupt bet. So a
Yeah.
corrupt bet is one where you make a bet and you contact someone where they throw the game. You've invalidated the results of
Mm-hmm.
all of the incorrupt, so the
Right.
normal valid bets. And I think that is probably why not only is betting regulated, but it's forbidden, because it can change the results of everything. In Western culture or in Western society, uh, that follow innocent until proven guilty, the reason for
Mm-hmm.
that is it's better to send 10 guilty men free than put one free man in jail. If you
Right.
follow that to betting, you would think it's better to let 10 bad bets go through rather than have one good bet be prevented. But the problem is the bad bets invalidate the good bets because they've
Right.
changed the results that the bets were based on.
Right. It has removed the intent of the sport.
And and it's the fact that all bets are interlinked with each other. So
Mm-hmm.
w- if you want to have a bad bet, it's not a problem unless that bet affects other bets. And
Right.
that's I think where the problem comes in gambling, particularly on sports, is that they're all interlinked. And so because you're manipulating the result, or that you
Mm-hmm.
enabling gambling on sporting events can encourage you to manipulate the result, you
Yeah.
can't bet on it.
So let's talk about something that, like, let's think about something that is truly random. So let's just think about taking away the idea of a team-based
So
event
are
or
are
sporting
are,
event.
are, are we okay on sports? Because
Yeah.
I think we've talked this one pretty thoroughly.
Yeah. And so let's just say that there is a system that is a as close to random as possible number
So
generator.
like a
And
lottery.
yeah, a lottery, exactly. And I was just going to separate it to just a single number gets drawn, and the person that, and you bet on what number that's going to be. You can put a certain amount. So 1 to 1 billion, you can put any amount of money on any single number from 1 to 1 billion,
Mm-hmm.
and you win all the other money if you get it right, or you share it with whoever else picked that number.
Sure.
You know, is the and so there is and the verifiability of the random number generator is checked every single time before the number is picked. So everyone is fairly certain that it's of good integrity,
Okay.
um, in whatever ways people are gonna
It's a truly
want
random
to.
number.
Yeah. So with that, is there something morally wrong if there is literally no way anyone can affect things if they are betting, if they're gambling?
Basically, what you're asking is, if no one can be immoral about it, is it morally wrong to do?
Right.
That's kind of what you're asking.
Yeah, basically.
It seems kind of like a self-answering question. I think the problem with lotteries comes into, is there manipulation? So
Right.
historically, when lotteries have been done, they're run by a particular person, and in some cases, that particular person can change, again, kind of what we were talking about before, change the results to benefit either
Hmm.
themselves or someone that they know. So they can run the lottery, and if one of their friends gets a ticket, they can
Hmm.
intentionally pick those numbers or pick that ticket, whether that be, if you have, for instance, just names in a hat, you can
Hmm.
have a name already held in your hand, and so through sleight of hand, you can manipulate the results.
Yeah.
It's a little harder to
Yep.
do with, for instance, the way that lotteries are done in the U.S., I believe, is with balls flying around a chamber, and then one is taken randomly out.
Yeah. Effectively random. It's going to be very difficult, and it's selected at random. It's really only the person reading it is literally only reading it.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
So they are removing any chance that anyone could interfere. But there are always ways they could potentially interfere if someone breaks the system and finds a way and weights all the balls differently so that there's a statistically higher
There's a
chance
slight
that a certain
chance.
ball
Sure.
that's going to be in the top or wherever it is.
Sure. So it sounds like the problem with lottery is in the manipulation of the
Mhm.
results.
Right.
So if you can remove that, and for instance, in the U.S., usually lotteries are state run.
Hmm.
You're basically saying we trust the state, uh, even though technically you could end up having corruption there. The way that lotteries tend to be run is with a lot of random physicality.
Hmm.
Of like you were saying, there's just physics, and it's really hard to manipulate physics.
Right.
So there's also a benefit in terms of having state-run lotteries because you remove at least some of the immorality, or at least you hope to remove it, because when it's not one single person running it, it's a large group running it, the
Hmm.
likelihood of corruption disappears, especially when the method by which the numbers are selected is open. It's
Right.
nearly impossible to have some sort of corruption. And if the person running the lottery won, it would look very
Yeah.
suspicious. So I believe there are regulations around people running the lottery being able to win the lottery.
Right. And like if they are, part of that, and it going back to like monitoring of bank accounts,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's like, okay, where did this $2 million come from in your bank account? You don't this is your only job that you've claimed on your taxes or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Sure.
It's a bit
And
problematic.
and with the money that goes into lottery, some of it goes towards the winners. Some of it can also go towards other government activities.
Hmm.
And that's one of the
Yeah.
benefits of a government running a lottery is it's kind of a voluntary tax where
Yeah.
you're paying it, and you're generally paying a very small amount, but with the potential to get a lot out. But that large amount out that you could get is not the entirety of it. You can also
Yeah.
run other government programs.
Yeah. And I mean, there doesn't always have to be a winner is the other thing. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not like we are drawing names from a hat of everyone that has put in a ticket. It's like
Mm-hmm.
everyone's getting numbers and in numbers in some way, shape, or form,
Mm-hmm.
and they may win or they may not, but there doesn't have to be a winner week to week or month to month or however long it is.
Sure.
Um, so they, yeah, that's all there. And um, I kind of lost my train of thought.
That's fine.
Uh,
I
yeah,
think we've largely covered lotteries fairly well, so we can probably move on to other types.
yeah.
And I'm
So
go ahead.
yeah, you keep going.
All right. So I think the other big elephant in the room that we haven't covered yet is casinos
Hmm.
and that
Which are
type of
effectively
betting.
lotteries on a small scale. Because
The-
most casinos, most I'm going to start with slot machines. The majority of slot machines, at least in the U.S., are based on a bingo system, wherein the and what's like shown on the screen as far as the animatics and pictures and things all is determined in a behind the scenes in a bingo format. Random numbers are drawn, and you are given a bingo card, and in a lot of the machines, it'll actually show you your card and show you which numbers got picked. So if you ever wanted to verify, you could actually like look at it, and you
okay.
can change your card if you want to, but it's random. So like you're just gonna get another random card. You
And
and
that I think with slot machines comes back to how honorable is the generation. So if it's a computer system, it could be open to hacking.
right,
But but you don't have to go to slot machines for or
yeah,
digital slot machines. You can go to old-fashioned slot machines, and as long as there's no mechanical hubbubbery,
hmm,
there's not too much to worry about. I think
yeah,
uh,
and
a better example of true random chance and how casinos work, probably the best example is roulette.
yeah.
I believe there are 50 numbers on a roulette wheel.
Well, it's the 50 numbers, and then you have the two additional spots that are
I thought it was
um,
yeah, 24 black, 24 red, and 2 green, right?
yeah,
And basically, you get paid out based on the probability of hitting those. So
yep.
it's a 1 in 50 chance that you hit green. So if you put $1 on green and it hits that, you get $50 back.
Mm, no.
No, you get how much do you
Oh,
get back?
sorry, green. Oh, sorry, green. I was thinking black. It's yeah, 1 in 50 chance of green, um, and you can do that if you get it. Black or red is basically you a little bit goes to the house. So black or
Mm-hmm.
red have like a 49% chance of it being black or a 49% chance of it being red. And if you get black, you double your money. So overall, if you only bet on black, you'll end up losing money statistically
Mm-hmm.
um, after infinite bets. But that's where it comes down to is things are almost equivalent, so that 49% chance to double your money
Hmm.
is, most people are going to be like, well, yeah, I'll take that. That's basically a 50% chance.
So and this is where the difficulty of casinos and the morality of casinos comes in, is that usually when you're betting, the perceived probability is different than the actual probability.
Hmm.
That
And the
if
gambler's fallacy is totally
right,
real.
right, if we see 10%, well, that's 1 in 10. I could do this 10 times, and I would expect to win at least once,
Right.
and
So
that's
if you've gone 9 times, you're like, well, this 10th one is a guaranteed bet, but it's not.
right, and
um,
that's the probability is something that people have a lot of difficulty with understanding and internalizing. So, for
mm,
instance, expected values. I was looking into the math of probabilities, and if you have a 1 in 10 chance,
mm,
or a 1 in X chance. So if that's the way that you're measuring probability, um, how many times would you have to take that bet in order to expect about a 50-50 chance?
hmm
And it's interestingly enough, the number of times that you have to iterate a bet with a probability of 1/n is
mm,
about 69% of n. So 0.69 times n. So if
yeah,
the probability is 1%, that's 1 in 100. You would have to run that about 69 times before there's approximately a 50% probability that you would get one success. So
yeah,
it's not that you would have to run it 100 times. You would only have to run it 69 times, and you would expect a 50% chance.
mm,
But that's not for a certainty, and it's never a certainty. And this is where the gambler's paradox comes in of, oh, well, I lost 20 times in a row. I'm due for a win.
yeah. And it's like, no, because every single time you can analyze the system as a whole and say statistically you should have had a win by now.
Mm-hmm.
But does that mean you're guaranteed to win? No, because every single
And
roll or every single number and pick is going to be its own 1 in 100 chance.
and more importantly, your chances have not changed with independent interactions.
Yeah.
If
Right.
you have 100 balls in a bag, 50 of them are red, and 50 of them are blue, and you pull out 40 of them and they're all red, yes, the probability has increased that the next one you pull out will be blue.
Right.
But if you keep on putting the balls back in, after you take it out, you look at it and put it
Hmm.
back in, it's still going to be a 50-50.
Right.
So recognizing that every time you pull the lever on a slot machine, your chances are not improving.
Right.
Even if you're on a losing
Because
streak, your chances are not
you are
improving.
you are reset. You are constantly resetting the odds every single time
Mm-hmm.
you spin.
Yes. So if casinos know that, because the mantra for casinos is the house always wins, and
Yep.
it's because all the bets that you're taking there are in favor of the house, even if just a
Right.
little bit. So, for instance,
Yep.
with roulette, you can't get a bet that is above 50% chance of giving you money,
Right.
and you can't get you
Well, you can't get a bet that's above 50% chance of doubling your money.
correct. And if you get 30 times your money, the chance is less than 1 in 30 that you'll
Right.
get it, which
So
means that
ultimately, they
w-
can be one-off winners, but as a whole, the house always wins.
yes, exactly. So if the house always wins, but people come there hoping that they can get money and that they can win,
Mhm.
if the house always wins, is that just the house taking advantage of people that think that they can win? And I think this is where the morality comes in
Mhm.
regards to casinos,
Yeah.
because people have a difference in perceived versus actual probability, and the house is taking advantage of that. They're
Yeah.
taking advantage by taking people's money.
I mean, how is that different than a lottery, though? That is basically the lottery will always make more money than it puts out,
So I think
even if it's run by the state.
I think the difference is that everyone knows that they will almost certainly not win the lottery. There are a couple of people that will go out and spend all of their money on lottery tickets. That does
Yeah.
happen. But for the most part, when people buy a lottery ticket, they see wow, this is $500 million that I could get for buying one lottery ticket for $1.
Hmm. Yeah.
They also are able to recognize that the difference between buying one lottery ticket and 5 lottery tickets is still very insignificant.
Yep.
And
I mean, but people will still do it. They buy
sure,
more than one.
people will still do it, but far fewer than number of people that actually buy lottery tickets. So most of the time what
Yeah.
happens is people will see, oh, wow, that's a very large value in the lottery. I'm going to go out and buy one ticket. And I think one of the reasons that people do that is not necessarily because they expect to win it. And
Yeah.
this is the thing. You don't expect to win the lottery. You buy the ticket because you like fantasizing about being able to win. That
Right.
if I don't buy a lottery ticket, I can maybe think about what I would do with that $500 million, but
Hmm.
there's no reality to it. I know that I'm daydreaming. But if I have a lottery
Yeah.
ticket in my hand, then I can say, am I daydreaming? Yes. But you're telling me there's a chance. And
Yeah.
that $1 being able to fantasize about what I would do with the money is worth the $1 that's paid. And I think that that's what, even if people aren't explicitly doing that, I think that's
Hmm.
generally what people are doing, which is why they only buy one and they don't go out and spend their life savings. Because to
Most
maximize the
people.
probability, you would spend your life savings on lottery tickets, but people don't do that. Most
Well,
people
yeah.
don't do that.
Yep. I
And
mean,
the difference between so with the lottery, people know they won't win. With casinos and things like slot machines or roulette or craps, the probability, the perceived probability and the actual
mhm.
probability are close enough that people don't internalize or discern the difference.
Right.
And that's where it becomes more morally questionable, is that the casino knows that people are going to bet based off the perceived value and not based off of the actual value, and that will the casino is
Hmm.
encouraging for them to do things that they would not otherwise do,
Hmm.
and they may spend their life savings because I am spending money, but I'm on a losing streak, and I know that I'm due for a win, so I just have to keep paying out until I win.
Right. Yep. And that's the gambler's fallacy.
Sure,
Um,
and I guess the question really becomes: should people be allowed to
is
do that? Because if
Yeah.
it's
I mean,
their
I've
money,
heard gambling and lotteries and stuff in general be described as attacks on stupid people that are
mhm,
non-mathematicians, people that don't understand the odds. So
sure, yeah.
that's just that morally wrong to play to people's hopes, but still statistically they're going to lose.
Well, and it's also a manipulation of their state of being. So, for instance, what a lot of casinos will do is provide free entry, or
Yeah.
almost free entry. They may give
Or free
you
soda, beer, pay for
per,
a room if you start
partic
winning a lot.
absolutely, particularly with free alcohol or very,
Yeah.
very cheap alcohol. People can say, oh, well, I'm getting cheap alcohol anyway. I might as well go there. Oh, well, while I'm here, I might as well try my hand at the
Right.
uh, some of the machines. And the other problem is that if you're intentionally getting people drunk
Hmm.
or
You are
buzzed
lowering their inhibitions.
and increasing the likelihood of them spending money, while also decreasing their ability to actually do math and understand what they're
Right.
doing. So
Yeah.
it's an incredibly, incredibly predatory practice, and
Yep.
yet people will voluntarily go in and do it.
Hmm.
So the question really becomes with casino gambling, where the odds are in the house's favor, and the house is putting people in a position where they're more likely to bet money, all regardless of the amount of money,
Hmm.
and start betting against the house, even though the house knows that it's going to win in the long run. Is that morally questionable?
Yeah. And I think the predatory practices are morally questionable. If you are intentionally doing things to play up, yeah, I mean, ultimately the house is going to win no matter what. That's
Sure.
just well, you know, unless the
That
house is only around for a day or two,
that
there's always a chance that they're going to
but
win the
there's
rest.
nothing inherently wrong with that. Let's take, for example, a company that just manufactures a product. It's product X. Who
Mhm.
cares what it is? They know that every time you buy that product, they get a, let's say, 5% profit margin. That it
Right.
costs them a certain amount to make the product, and they gain 5% whenever you buy it.
Hmm.
they're going to want to make it sound as good as possible. They're going to play it up. They're going to say, here's all the features. Here's why you should buy it. They're going to go to locations where they think people will buy it. So give them easy access to the merchandise. They're going to be
Yep.
playing it up, sending out advertisements, and all for the purpose of you buying it, knowing that the people selling it will make a profit on the person that they're selling it to. That's
Hmm.
predatory. So how is a casino saying, hey, you should make this bet, and making it more comfortable for you to make that bet, and making the ambiance more pleasurable? How is that any different from any form of exchange?
Because the house knows the odds, and
But
they're
if you're buying a product, the
yeah,
odds that the company profits from you are 100%.
yeah, but you are getting a product out of it. You're getting something in return for your money.
So is getting something out of your money a part of what casinos do? Because if a casino is an experience, and the experience is going through the possibility of earning money,
Mhm.
that's what
I
you're
mean,
paying for.
so if I go into a casino and I lose $2,000,
Yep.
and so I did that in 2 hours, I am paying $1,000 an hour for the experience of losing my money.
It's not the experience of losing your money. You're paying for the experience of imagining
Possibly,
that
yeah,
you might be getting money. And there is a very real possibility of that. And some
yeah,
people will be successful in that, just again, due to probabilities. But you are likely to not be successful. And even if you
hmm,
know that, again, with the perceived versus actual, even if you know the actual probability is lower, if your perceived probability is higher than 50%,
yeah,
or you expect that there is a perceived possibility that you'll actually win, you endorphins in your brain go off. You enjoy the experience more. And one of the problems with gambling is that it's an addiction. It can be
yeah,
addictive. So just like a drug, people can get addicted to it. They can actually enjoy it and spend all of their money on it, just like in drug addiction.
right,
And just like in drugs, once the experience is gone, you don't have anything to show for it.
yep,
So arguably, since gambling technically can make you money, and strictly only taking drugs cannot make you money, gambling is more morally acceptable than taking drugs.
yeah, because there's a chance that you will win, even if that chance is played over in infinite scenarios, is you know
Low.
effectively, uh, yeah, right.
So,
There's always the chance of making money in gambling,
mm-hmm,
but you might just be the lucky one. It's like
mm-hmm.
we'll go. I mean, praying to a god to win for you to win the lottery, is that morally wrong? Because
Well,
you have some investment, and you have belief that some higher power is going to potentially listen to you, so you ask it.
sure, and that gets more into the moral questionability of cheating, which I don't think
Right.
that's what we're talking about here. We talked a little bit about
Hmm.
that in terms of manipulation, but I think right now in terms of gambling and just acting on known probabilities.
Hmm.
So again, with casinos, there are strictly known probabilities or calculable
Yeah.
probabilities, and yet people are betting on them anyway. I think the validity of people that from people that claim that gambling is immoral is the fact that the organizations that are running it know that what they're selling to people is the experience of possibly making
They're
money.
selling hope.
Yes, they're selling hope, and they know that they're selling hope. They're selling the
Yeah.
experience of hope, but the person gambling does not know that what they're buying is the possibility of hope, or at least generally they're not consciously aware that that's what they're paying for, as
Hmm.
opposed to the possibility of actually winning.
Right. Yeah.
And there are people that I've seen that are smart. They know the odds. They'll take a set amount of money and
Yeah.
say, you know what? I'm going to pay for the experience. I know I'm going to lose all of
Yeah.
this, but I'll spend it anyway. And
Never,
there's
never bet more than you're willing to lose. That's what it comes down to.
but what if you're willing to lose it all?
Well, then you could bet it all, I guess.
So if you know the stats and you're willing to lose it all and bet it all, should people be allowed to do that? Because it's their decision, and just like drugs,
Mhm.
People should be able to make whatever decisions they want as long as they're not affecting others. So why not?
Yeah.
Even if casinos are practicing manipulative and they have predatory practices, regardless of whether or not the
I
person
mean,
buying the product knows exactly what they're getting, or buying the experience knows
mhm.
exactly what they're getting. If the person is getting something out of it and they go into it voluntarily, and
Yeah.
there's no direct lying of, if you say, well, what's the probability that I'm going to win?
They're gonna.
90%. It's as long as you're not directly lying about that,
Yeah.
there's nothing measurably immoral.
Yeah. I mean, is it immoral to if someone's a high roller and they end up winning big one night in Vegas? As they're walking out the door, they end up just like throwing a huge stack of money onto a roulette table, and end up winning huge from it. Is it
Mm-hmm.
wrong for that the hotel or casino or whatever it is to then say, "Oh, how about you have another free night?" And it's just like, "Stay here a night,"
Mm-hmm.
and then people are gonna be like, "Oh yeah, I'll take that." And because the house knows that if they're staying in their hotel, they're like, well, they're gonna come
They'll
back to it.
probably gamble again.
They'll probably gamble again, and so they'll probably
Sure.
statistically end up losing the money that they just made, and so we turn a profit on this individual case,
Sure.
no matter what.
And so the house is encouraged to it behooves the house to encourage more gambling, which,
Hmm.
again, if there's nothing inherently wrong with gambling as long as people know what they're getting themselves into,
Yeah.
who cares? As long
Is
as
it?
as long
Yeah.
as it's a voluntary interaction, it doesn't matter.
I mean, the question is it wrong to prey on stupid people? Like,
Here's a
that's
different
effectively
question.
what's
Is it wrong to forbid smart people? So for instance,
doing.
if you're in a casino and you're playing something that does actually have to do with your skill in the game. So
Hmm.
poker is a good example of, and poker and
Yeah.
blackjack. If
Yep.
you're smart and you can read people in poker, not necessarily in blackjack, you can increase the probability that you win.
Yeah.
And if you get on too long of a winning streak, in some cases, the casino can kick you out because it's private property and they can kick you out for whatever reason they want.
Yeah.
So they can give you your winnings and kick you out.
Hmm.
Should that be permitted?
I mean, they are, as you said, that it's private property. They have, I mean, for them to stay in business, they need to continue to make money. And if someone comes in and disrupts that majorly, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, you know, we we know the odds. You may
We
know the odds
we
too.
know the odds, but that also comes into manipulation of the odds.
Yeah.
Because if someone comes in and they're not cheating, so for instance, they're not slipping cards into their hands or moving chips around or anything like that.
Hmm.
And there are a lot of cameras in casinos to
Oh
make
yeah.
sure that that doesn't happen.
Yep.
But assuming that there's no cheating, if a person is kicked out for being too good, that means that the house is getting rid of people that would win and making it so that only
Wow.
bad people are coming in, which means that they're actively manipulating the probabilities.
I mean, are they actively manipulating the probabilities by kicking out someone that has truly just gotten lucky 10 times
So
and won?
actually, here's a throwing back to what we were discussing earlier. The thing that makes sports betting bad is that if you make a bet with the intent of manipulating the result, then you've negatively affected all the other people that made valid bets and did not try to manipulate the
Yeah.
result. If you're in a casino and, for example, with poker, the house will be losing, but all the other people that are playing against that player will also be losing.
In poker, yes. In blackjack, no.
Sure, in blackjack, multiple players can win even if the house loses, but in
Yeah, it's
poker,
it's every player against the dealer or
sure,
against the house.
sure. In poker, if one person is constantly winning, it would
Mhm.
behoove the house to get rid of that person because it discourages all the other players from playing because they're all losing.
Yeah. Or, if someone is such a statistical anomaly that, there is if it's like a 1 in 10 billion chance that they're getting this lucky, or more likely, maybe they're cheating in some way.
Mm-hmm.
It is easier for the house to be able to say, okay, you have gotten really lucky. Take your winnings, leave.
Mm-hmm.
And so the person, takes their winnings. If they truly did just get lucky, they're like, okay, well, I guess I won this much. And if they were cheating, they kind of got off scot-free. But there are definitely systems to identify people that regularly beat the odds in extreme ways like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the better question is, what about just like card counting? If you keep track of what the
Hmm.
probabilities are and you make bets off of that, that's just you using your intelligence. And the house can get around that by increasing the number of decks of cards that are used in blackjack,
Right. Yep.
making it effectively the probabilities never change. And
Hmm.
so the game is not as dynamic as it would be with a single set of cards,
Right.
making it harder to win knowing the state of the deck, because you can't really know the state of the deck, or at least the state of the deck doesn't have a major effect on the initial probabilities.
Right. Yeah. So I think, I think that it isn't. I don't think it's morally wrong to understand the system and play to the system. Understanding how things work, and maybe yeah, I'm gonna go back to a sporting example. Maybe you have a team that is plays in a very warm region, so I'm going to say Florida, and they are going the to northern Wisconsin in winter,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's going to be a lot colder, and so that they probably don't have anywhere near as much experience playing in the winter as the team that they're playing in the north,
Sure.
and so you're like, well, that means that there's probably a significant chance that that is going to play in and affect statistics such that they're going to lose. Is that morally wrong? Because you're just playing to the system. I think that's similar as counting cards. If you are good enough to be able to count cards, you are playing to the system and playing within the system.
Sure. And having knowledge about the system, or having knowledge about what the input values and variables, should not preclude you from being able to bet. Basically, what you're saying is, if you have more knowledge than someone else, can you still bet against that other person without that knowledge? And
As long as you're playing within the within the system.
yeah, as long as you're playing within the system, there's nothing wrong, because you're within the system.
Mhm.
It's kind of a um, uh, what self-referential rule. It's a tautology.
Yeah.
If you're playing within the system, then you're playing within the system. If you're playing within the rules, then you're not breaking any rules. So
Right.
you may have more knowledge than other people, but that's equivalent in betting. It's equivalent to sports and having more skill than someone.
Hmm.
If I
Yeah.
know that the Miami Dolphins, who are the Florida team, come up and play against the Packers in the middle of winter, which is from Wisconsin, they're going to have a certain disadvantage because they're playing in cold and they're not used to playing in the cold.
Hmm.
Knowing that it puts you at an advantage, but it's not an unfair advantage. The only problem is the fact that it's a sports game, and
Yeah.
there's regulation on that, again, with what we discussed earlier.
Yeah. The sports teams do regulate the weather.
Some of them try with
With domes and things. Yeah.
domes. Yeah.
But not every sports team has a dome.
I want to see a sports game where in Florida they make it snow.
That would be it would be interesting to watch. I'll give you
It
that.
would be very interesting to watch.
I
So,
mean, given how much money sporting agencies make,
mhm.
they could definitely afford a few thousand snow machines above the field.
Yeah, but snow machines actually do need a certain air temperature to be able to work. But we're getting really off topic
And
now.
then a whole bunch of air conditioners on top of that.
Yeah. So, going back to the question of casinos and perceived probability versus real probability,
Hmm.
would it be more moral? Because it sounds like as long as people are getting something out of it and it's a voluntary transaction, and the house is not being completely dishonest about the probabilities,
Hmm.
I think that last portion of the house being dishonest about probabilities is hiding what the actual probabilities are dishonest. So in other words, if you're in roulette and you're betting on black and there's a 49% chance instead of a 50% chance, should that percentage be posted? Should organizations be required to post what the probabilities are?
I think that they shouldn't they shouldn't actively, deny that information. But it's stating the probabilities of every single,
D-
bet is kind of
Denial
extreme.
is different than being forthcoming about the results.
Right.
And for instance, in craps, if someone's rolling the dice, someone can say, "What's the probability of me getting snake eyes on this particular roll?" The
One
same
in
as every
36.
roll, and you can honestly say that. So
Yeah.
it seems to me like honesty is the crux of whether or not gambling is moral.
Right.
In in
And yeah,
in sport,
honesty.
go ahead.
Yeah, honesty is there. I mean, there's the question of, is it wrong to hide the whole truth, and to what extent? It's like, well, we could post we could post the probabilities on every single thing on this table, um, but that would make the table noisy, and that it would be like noisy to the eye, and might pull away from the experience. And it pulls away from the people that are like there and are there really for the hope. You know, they in their back
Okay,
of their mind they may know the statistics, but they aren't there because they know the statistics. They're there because there is a non-zero chance that they're going to walk out a winner as an individual.
okay. Now, if people are paying for hope,
Hmm.
and as soon as they've made the transaction, they have received hope or the experience of hoping for a good outcome. Does that mean that it would, by that logic, and that someone getting something out of the transaction makes it a valid transaction? That would
Hmm.
mean that if I run a lottery and I just say, nope, no one won this one, I'm just going to take all this money for the state or for myself.
Hmm.
As long as people believe that that interaction was fair. So if you tell people, hey, put money into a pot, and there are 10 people, there are 20 numbers.
Yep.
If Which means that there's only a 50% chance that each person gets one number. There are 20 numbers, which means there's a 50% chance that one of the people will win. If you tell
Hmm.
everyone, you could win the entire pot if your number is pulled. But if it's not pulled, then I win, and I get to
Right.
keep the money. And I manipulate that to the point where I always win.
Or you win enough that.
Sure, that I actually
Yeah.
win more than 50% of the time. So I'm
Right.
being dishonest, and I manipulate the actual statistics. But everyone else still is getting value out of hoping that they could win, as
Hmm.
long as they continue to agree that they never disagreed, they never felt cheated,
Yep.
they never felt cheated. Is that acceptable? Or is there something inherently wrong with being dishonest?
There is
Even
something,
if
I'm going to say
being
there
honest
is.
means that I am more likely to win, that I have an advantage even when I'm being dishonest. So giving myself more of an advantage without telling them, is that still morally wrong?
Yeah, because that is dishonesty, and the act of doing something dishonest is in itself, a dishonest act. Talking about tautology. Um, so in that case, if you are saying one thing and doing another, you are being dishonest. And I mean, is lying morally wrong is a question that we have, but I think um, in this case we can just say yes, it's morally wrong to lie, and we can make that assumption until that conversation is had on this podcast about whether or not lying is wrong. But if lying is wrong, then being dishonest is wrong. Can you
And
agree with
and,
that?
and I think that's fair. It's a little tautological, but I think it's fair that in terms of gambling, it's not the gambling and it's not the advantage or the house having the advantage. If the house lies about their advantage, then the lying is wrong, not the having
Right.
the advantage.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that's the important distinction. It's not the
Yep.
advantage that makes it immoral. It's the lying about how much of an advantage they have. But not being forthcoming about how much of an advantage they have is not required
Well,
to be
so not
moral.
being absolutely like outright with the advantage, but if someone asks, they should say like, yes, we have this
Exactly.
advantage.
Exactly. Don't be dishonest about what the probabilities are when it comes up, but you don't have to go out and say, hey, will you take this bet? You will almost certainly lose money on it.
Yeah.
That requiring people to say that would discourage people from actually gambling. But
Hmm.
again, casinos are recognizing that what people are really paying for is the hope.
Yeah.
And whether or not they know that that's what they're paying for, that is what they're buying. And casinos provide that. And so long as the casinos do it in an honest fashion, that seems to be why casinos can operate morally. But again, it's assuming that the casinos are honest about it, even though it's a predatory practice.
Yeah. If you're honest about your predatory practices, or enough so that, it's within whatever morals we're setting, I guess.
If you're talking to a girl and you're buying her drinks, and there's nothing wrong with buying a girl drinks, even if you have the intent of getting her drunk to the point of being open to having sex with you. That being said, if she says, "Are you just trying to get me drunk so I have sex with you?" and then you lie about it, that's the morally reprehensible bit, not the trying to get into her pants.
Right.
It may be looked down upon and looked at as taboo by society, but there's nothing inherently prosecutable.
Yeah, and I mean that sort of thing happens all the time everywhere. It's like,
and in both directions too.
Yeah, and in both. I mean, I'm gonna say it's not just like a guy going after girl or girl going after guy, like romantic situations. Like, oh, we're going into this business meeting. Well, there's just some fine cognac here there's a fine cognac here on the counter. You're welcome to drink it if you want it, and they know that if people drink it, they're going to be more likely to be agreeable in most cases, and they're more likely to kind of their inhibitions are going to be lessened, and it's going to make
alcohol is a very easy way of manipulating people,
right?
And that's one of the reasons that casinos use it. And it seems like if there's anything morally reprehensible about preying on people, then we should probably more bring it would be more meaningful to bring up alcohol usage in discussions.
I mean, but going back to earlier point, is it wrong to be praying for a god to be preying on someone?
I think that we should have that as a separate topic when we talk about cheating. That is the attempt to cheating, even if there's no possibility of result, is that wrong? So I think let's say
the person, they might believe there's possibility of a result,
right? But I think let's save that one for a separate episode.
Yeah.
So in terms of
if I rub my lucky walnut, I believe that's going to help me win whatever.
If it actually helped, casinos would not allow lucky walnuts into casinos.
Yeah. Well, if I know I have it.
Right. So I think I've covered the aspects of gambling that I wanted to.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think we've covered it all.
Cool. Well, let us know what you think in the comments. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this discussion. Your interest really means a lot to us. If you want to help support this podcast and our goal of sparking discussions and bringing people together, check out how to contribute in the description. Happy deeping!
The content of this podcast does not reflect the views and opinions held by anyone involved. We will frequently be playing the devil's advocate strictly for the purpose of exploration of ideas and not as an endorsement of any subsequent action. We condemn all acts of violence other than those of self-defense against physical harm.